Welcome to a PreventConnect podcast, where we explore the prevention of violence against women. This is a project of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault.
My name is Kearl. I'm the founder of Stop Street Harassment, and I'm based in the Washington, D.C. area. This is my third year at the National Sexual Assault Conference, and I really am excited that street harassment has been included into the conversation. Street harassment is absolutely part of the spectrum of gender violence. It's part of the way that harassers and abusers disrespect people's bodies and don't give them consent for interactions. There are so many sexual assault survivors out there who can feel re-triggered and re-traumatized by the harassment on the streets, by men saying comments about their bodies or following them or grabbing them. Street harassment can escalate to sexual assault. So in the workshop that I did, I talked about some of these connections. I talked about what street harassment is. Many people in the room were familiar with it, but they didn't really know quite the types that it entails, so that it does include sexually explicit comments, following, groping, in addition to kind of the catcalls that people stereotypically think of. Whistling construction workers typically comes to people's minds, but it's a lot more than that. I also talked about how it's a global problem. In countries like Egypt and Yemen and India, there are studies showing that it's this huge, huge problem, but it's also a huge problem in countries like France and the US and Canada, where there also have been some studies conducted. Talked a little bit about the young age that street harassment begins. I wrote a book on street harassment, and as part of my research, I surveyed more than 800 women. Almost 1 in 4 of them had been harassed by the age of 12, which is 7th grade, and nearly 90% have been harassed by age 19. Keeping the young age in mind, a lot of the resources that I offered to attendees were things that they could do specifically with young people, with high school age and college age people, and women and young men in particular, since that age range really experiences a lot of harassment. And that's also an age range for women in particular where there's a lot of sexual violence. So I think it's very logical that a lot of women who are harassed in the streets in that age range may fear, is this going to escalate to something else? Because it could. So I gave people 5 main takeaways. I have a lot more resources for people, though, on my website and in my book. But the first was really just sharing stories, talking about this issue. It's so normalized in our society and just seen as the way things are, or it's a compliment, or it's the fault of the harassed person. But we need to bring this social problem to the forefront by sharing our stories, especially with people who may not know this is a problem. 2, I talked about talking to young people about ways that they can respond when they are harassed. Too often we are taught just to ignore it, and of course that is a fine response, but I want people to know there are other options that they can have, such as just telling the person to stop or to back off, that you're not interested, which can sound so basic, but when you're socialized to be polite and that you are supposed to acquiesce to men, it can be a very hard thing to do. 3, I talked about engaging young men around this issue and gave resources like Masculinity U, Men Can Stop Rape, and a workshop that Girls for Gender Equity did. They are based in New York City, and they have a Sisters in Strength program with teenage girls. And the teenage girls decided that street harassment is a big problem for them, and they wanted to do a 3-hour workshop with the boys in their lives. They called it Bring Your Brother Workshop, and they brought their brothers and their cousins, and they designed the workshop, and they talked about gender roles. What does it mean to be a man and a woman? What are the messages we get? How are we taught to interact in public spaces? And then the young women shared their stories and said, when this happens to me on the street, I feel this way. And it was, I think, a perfect dynamic, because those are the girls that the young men care about and that they'll listen to and they'll respect. So it was very eye-opening for the young men, and it was a very successful program. It is important to have those discussions and dialogues and talking about masculinity and how does that feed into the problem of street harassment. I gave a lot of examples about using art to raise awareness, be that graffiti art, street art, doing sidewalk chalk messaging where you've been harassed, or just to put anti-harassment messages out, talking to young people about this and then giving them art supplies so that they can immediately portray what they're experiencing or feeling. That's been very successful in a number of situations that I've been able to work with young people in. And then 5, I encouraged everyone to participate in a program that I organize. Every spring in April, I organize International Anti-Street Harassment Week. Anyone, anywhere in the world can participate just by speaking out against street harassment, sharing their stories, tweeting, posting an image on their Facebook page. And I have a lot of toolkits if people actually want to have a rally or hold an event or do a march, but at minimum I just want people talking about this issue. So I think that there was a lot of really positive feedback because people are starting to see that connection between street harassment, sexual harassment in the schools, in the workplace, sexual assault and rape. Like, they're all interconnected. A lot of the harassers are kind of being probably the same people who harass women in all those different situations too, which is another connection. If people want to learn more about the work on street harassment, they can visit my site, which is stopstreetharassment.org.
Thank you for listening to this PreventConnect podcast. PreventConnect is a project of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, with funding from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The views presented on PreventConnect are not necessarily the views of the United States government, the CDC, or CalCASA. To learn more about PreventConnect, visit www.preventconnect.org. For more information about CalCASA's mission or to show your support, visit calcasa.org. That's CALCASA.org.